everybody, at long last another update in the series on my Honda S2000 build. If you haven't been following what I've been up to, well, I am trying to turn my little S2000 into the perfect Japanese weekend sunny day sports car. And I've been trying to do things as authentically JDM as I can, but not sticking rigidly to all of those principles. You know, I'm flexible and I'm realistic too. Certain things I need to source locally because there's no point spending more money just to get something from Japan. I want to make sure everything's done the right way and with the best parts. As it happens, many of those do come from Japan, so I've been able to sort of keep to the whole JDM thing for quite a bit of the build. I know for a lot of people the real headline thing that I'm doing is installing a set of ITBs. Those are JDM pieces coming from Toda, and I really can't wait to get them on. But before I did anything to this car's power, I wanted to make sure that the handling was as good as it could possibly be. And when I got this car, it simply wasn't. It was quite a wayward little so-and-so. The front end was quite darty, but the rear seemed to take some time to follow, and it would just break away pretty unexpectedly in corners. I know this car's always had a reputation for being somewhat snappy, but it felt just a little bit too snappy, so I wasn't really that keen on pushing on hard, and I wanted to explore why that was, what was wrong with the car. We took it over to Centre Gravity, who gave it a really thorough inspection, and they didn't actually return all that wrong with it, but I'd committed. I really wanted to make this car exactly what I'd always envisioned a modified car being. This is by far the most I've ever modded a car. I never really do that to my own vehicles, and I've really enjoyed the process. Now, before this video, what have we done? Well, we've done a lot of non-suspension chassis modifications. So we'd put pretty much every Powerflex polybush that you can buy on this car. I've gone with the purple series, though, not the black series, because it's still a road car. I may take it on track one day, but that's not the aim. It's supposed to be good for this kind of route. We'd also put a few chassis braces on. There's a Spoon X brace at the front, there's an upgraded Cusco brace at the back, there's a little transmission tunnel brace in the middle as well. All sorts of bits have gone onto the car in order to try and make it just that little bit more responsive and just that little bit more compliant and also confidence inspiring. I also put some new wheels on it, courtesy of the good people at OZ Racing, and a fresh set of Yokohama rubber. All of these things did make quite a big difference, and the car was certainly much better to drive. Didn't want to break away quite so keenly, and it was indeed very much an improved vehicle. But I wanted to go the whole hog and put better suspension on it too. Now, I've got to say, a lot of people out there told me that there was no point in doing that. Excuse me, I am going to have to put some sunglasses on. It's a pretty bright day, but I got the clearest ones I could find. The original suspension on this car is made by Showa. It's very, very trick stuff. It's even got little remote reservoirs on it. It's really quite high quality kit. The people at Centre Gravity gave it a thorough test, and they said it was still working within its sort of original parameters. And if you're trying to do an S2000 build on a reasonable budget, if you've got the original suspension and it's not in bad condition, you can probably afford to leave the dampers alone. Springs you may want to replace, and indeed my springs were past their best. They'd in fact sunk about 15 millimeters compared to when this car would have come out the factory gates, simply down to the ravages of time. The metal fatigues over the years, and that means that the car actually had adopted a lowered stance as it was. Because it is already fairly close to the ground, I didn't want to put suspension on to make the car sit any lower, but I just wanted to make sure that it was as fresh as it could be and also give me a little bit of adjustability. The S2000, being a very popular Japanese sports car, has a lot of suspension kits available for it. There was one brand in particular, though, that really stuck out to me, which was Ohlins. I'd known the Ohlins brand from when I did a lot of stuff with motorbikes, and they were always really high quality products. They had a kit called the DFV, that's a dual flow valve technology, and it's priced at about £2,000 RRP, which is pretty good. That's not silly expensive, but it's also not disturbingly cheap. So I acquired a set of that, and it sat in my garage for several months before I could get it fitted. Now, I know it's been a very long time since my last update on this car, but I'm very happy to say she's now got the Ohlins on. The reason it's taken so long to make the video isn't because it took so long to fit the suspension. That all happened, well, about 3 months ago. The problem was, I wanted first off to live with it for a bit, to see how I felt about it, and then to try and get a nice decent day to try and film with, to tell you all what it is like. Well, happily, the weather is now here. I've managed to get a couple of thousand miles under my belt with the new setup, and I'm delighted to say I utterly and totally love it. The first 100 miles or so, the car didn't really feel transformed like I might have expected it to. It's not exactly a plush ride, but it's not uncomfortable either. I mean, after all, it's still a fairly small little sports car. You don't expect these things to be that refined. However, the Ohlins has done something really quite remarkable. It's kept the compliance of the original Honda items. In fact, the people at Centre Gravity say they reckon it's probably a little bit more comfortable, and they are suspension experts. I am not, so they're probably right on that front. The steering in the car is still far from brilliant. That's something I'm working on. I've got some more pieces that might help that just a little bit, although at this stage I've more or less given up hope. It's okay, but it's far from great. MX-5 owners would not be impressed with this steering. However, this suspension's party piece really is the dual flow valve technology. I know most manufacturers of most products will have some sort of buzzword or key thing they're trying to use to sell you their product, and very often it turns out to be nothing but marketing fluff. However, with this, Ohlins really weren't mucking around. So there's two things in particular about the Ohlins that I quite liked. First off, they were just one-way adjustable. Now I say one-way adjustable, there's one screw that adjusts multiple parameters, which means for a lummox like me, if I feel the desire to muck around with the suspension, and I may do in the future, I only need to remember one setting. Now the people at Centre Gravity set it just aside from where Ohlins' recommendation would be. I think this is about 12 clicks off of full stiff, so I think that's a little bit firmer than Ohlins actually recommend for the road, but softer than they would recommend for track. Don't quote me on that though. I know a lot of people would prefer more adjustments in their suspension, but for me, I just wasn't really that fussed. It's also worth noting that Ohlins have changed their kit over the years, so this isn't the exact same damper and spring settings that you would find in an Ohlins kit from about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when they changed it, but they did make some differences. But what they've been trying to do is just to sort of curb the S2000's reputation for tail happiness. So the front end's always nice and darty and sharp. That's never been an issue, but it's the back that is the problem. So a lot of work has gone into making sure the car isn't quite as scary and as snappy as it can be. That I would say has definitely worked, because you can really lean on this car now with the new rubber and everything else that I've done. It's got very impressive grip, really does. I'm very happy with this setup. So what's all this DFV nonsense then? Okay, as mentioned, it's dual flow valve technology. Now, I'm probably simplifying this a little bit too much. Again, forgive me if I haven't got things precisely right. Most dampers will have in them more than one pathway for the fluid. After all you've got is a piston moving through a fluid, and inside there you have a couple of valves that essentially regulate the speed of the damper. That's how you control how firm the damper is. And generally speaking, a lot of dampers, particularly the high-end ones, will have I like this car. They'll have a slow pathway and a fast pathway, but there'll also be a sort of emergency pathway where everything really opens, or there's a big valve in the middle, and that's for if you've just hit a big rock, pothole, a speed bump. It's a way of getting the damper to move as quickly as it possibly can. However, that tends to be a one-way valve, because if it wasn't, then your damper wouldn't necessarily do its job properly. However, Ohlins have come up with a way of having, in those kind of scenarios where you've got a really fast, hard compression, the damper to actually be able to return itself at more or less the same emergency speed. This means that when you've got these sudden compressions, big problems in the road, potholes, that kind of jazz, the wheel is going to return to where it should be faster than in normal suspension. And you can feel it. You really can. This suspension works so quickly. It's amazing. It's kind of hard to describe, and I know it sounds an awful lot like gumph, but believe me, once you've tried it, you will be convinced. You feel this thing, like normal suspension does go like that. This just goes, whoop. It's just done. It's through. It's amazing. Oh, I love this car so much. And every time I drive it, it just gets just that little bit better. It's been ages since I've had a really good day. We had some really nice weather in March, and it's now June. And in between, it hasn't really been that good at all. So I've not been driving this a lot, because honestly, even with it being much better set up, what's the point in driving a car like this? With the roof up and it raining, it's just a miserable place to be. I've got so much more confidence in this car now, I really do. Just not to say that you don't still respect it, because it's still got a little bit of softness about it, so you still have to be relatively gentle with your inputs, but driving smooth is kind of how I always want to try and do things. Little bits like here, normally before, under throttle there, the car definitely would have broken away. Now, no, it's absolutely fine. I'm going to be doing a little bit more work to the brakes at some point in time. We've got upgraded hoses from Hell. Big thanks to them, they sent me those out. They're really cool, they're yellow as well. I know you can't normally see them, but hey, why not, right? And what I'm mostly going to be doing is putting on better discs, better pads, better fluid, and that probably is going to be okay for the brakes. We put a little brace for the brake cylinder up front that actually has helped pedal feel quite a bit. It's just that little bit more secure now. It's one of these silly things, you don't really think it'll make a difference, but it does. However, the point of today's video is about the suspension. Do I feel it's worth the money? Well, I haven't been able to compare it, of course, back to back with other suspensions for the same car, and unless it was in my exact car, I don't think you'd really be able to make a decent comparison. Is it worth buying? In isolation though, is it something that you should spend your money on? If you've got perfectly decent working dampers on your S2000 and you want something a little bit sportier, and you haven't got loads of budget, I would say just put some good springs on. If you do need to replace your dampers and you don't want something with million-way adjustability, you want a recognised brand name, you want high-quality components. I mean, these things, they look beautiful, and that doesn't really mean anything to some people. To me, it does. When you spend that kind of money, you really want it to be a decent quality feeling product. You don't open the box and go, oh, that feels a bit cheap and nasty. There was some concern that the supplied eye-back springs, which weren't always eye-back springs, that's another thing that they changed. They changed from some brand to eye-back. So eye-back's good quality, very happy with them. Also key to this, of course, is getting the car sorted by centre gravity, and that's not particularly cheap. You're looking at the best part of £1,000 to get the suspension installed and then all set and done right. So all in, you'd be about £3,000 for this. I think for most people, if you're already reasonably happy with how the car drives, not worth it. But if you are looking at upgrading, I'd say it's very worthwhile. It's really genuinely improved this car. Oh, I can't see, dickhead. Overall, really, really very happy with how this car feels now, and I think it at long last is ready for us to start adding a little bit more power. So that's going to happen at the end of July, which means hopefully you'll have a video to watch in about August or September. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but it's been that kind of year, and I wanted to make sure that everything was done right and in individual stages so I could really feel and appreciate every single step in the process and what it's brought to the table. The suspension did take me a little while to really appreciate it, but I absolutely do. It's very nice. So, thanks to everybody for watching. Hope you've been enjoying this little series. I'm so glad I have this car. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.